Right now, somewhere in the rainforest, an ant is climbing a tree. It does not want to climb the tree. It has no idea why it is climbing the tree. Something else is making it do this. Something that has been living inside its body for days, quietly eating it alive and saving the brain for last. That something is a fungus. Not the fuzzy kind you find on old bread. Not the kind you cook for dinner. This is a fungus that has spent millions of years perfecting one single skill, getting inside an animal, taking over its nervous system, and turning it into a vehicle. A delivery machine. A zombie. And here's the part that should make you put down whatever you are holding. This fungus is real. It exists right now. It is active on every continent except Antarctica. And scientists who study it say it is one of the most sophisticated biological systems ever discovered on Earth. Its name is Cordyceps. And once you understand what it actually does, you will never look at the natural world the same way again. Let's start at the beginning. Not the ant's beginning. The fungus's beginning. Cordyceps is not one species. It is a genus, a whole family of fungi, containing over 600 known species, and researchers believe hundreds more have not yet been cataloged. Each species has evolved to target one specific host. One species targets moths, another targets beetles, another targets wasps, another targets spiders, and the most studied species of all, Cordyceps unilateralis, targets carpenter ants. The targeting is not accidental. It is the result of an evolutionary arms race stretching back at least 48 million years. Scientists discovered a fossilized leaf in Messel, Germany, bearing the distinctive bite marks of a cordyceps-infected ant. The ant had bitten into the leaf's vein, exactly where infected ants bite today, and then died. That is not a coincidence. That is mastery. So how does it work? How does a fungus, something with no brain, no eyes, no nervous system of its own, manage to control an animal that does have all of those things? It starts with a spore. A cordyceps spore is microscopic. You could fit thousands of them on the head of a pin. They are released from the fruiting body, the mushroom-like stalk that grows out of a dead host, and they drift through the forest air until they land on an ant walking along the forest floor. The spore attaches to the ant's exoskeleton. Then it does something extraordinary. It begins to grow through the shell, not around it, through it. The fungus produces enzymes that dissolve the hard chitin of the ant's outer armor, and it pushes thread-like filaments called hyphae into the ant's body. Once inside, it begins to multiply. It spreads through the ant's blood, called hemolymph. It colonizes the soft tissues. It wraps itself around muscle fibers. And the ant keeps walking. It keeps foraging. It keeps doing its job. Because at this stage, the fungus is not yet interfering with behavior. It is just growing, quietly, patiently, getting ready. This phase can last 1 to 2 weeks. Then something changes. Researchers at Penn State University, led by David Hughes, have spent years studying exactly what happens inside an infected ant. What they found is astonishing. The fungus does not actually invade the ant's brain. Let that land for a moment. The organism that controls the ant's every movement never touches the brain at all. Instead, it surrounds the muscles. It infiltrates the muscle fibers directly, particularly the muscles that control the jaw and the legs. And it secretes chemical compounds directly into those muscles, forcing them to contract and move independently of what the ant's brain is telling them to do. The ant's brain is still running. It is still sending signals. But the fungus has hijacked the hardware. The body is no longer listening to the brain. It is listening to the fungus. This is not mind control in the way science fiction imagines it. A parasite plugging into a host's neurons and typing commands. This is something stranger and in many ways more sophisticated. The fungus has found a way to bypass the nervous system entirely and speak directly to the muscles in a chemical language the muscles cannot ignore. The ant begins to behave erratically. It abandons its colony. It staggers. It starts climbing up grass stems, up trees, up whatever vertical surface is nearby. And then it finds a leaf. Not just any leaf, the right leaf. Studies conducted in the rainforests of Thailand and Brazil have shown that infected ants consistently choose leaves at a very specific height above the forest floor, between 25 and 30 centimeters. Not higher, not lower. This height provides the exact temperature and humidity the fungus needs to complete its life cycle. The ant bites down on the leaf vein, a thick central rib that gives it a firm grip, and then it dies. The fungal compounds that force the jaw shut lock the ant's mandibles in place even after death. The ant hangs there, frozen in its final position, clamped to the underside of a leaf. And now the fungus begins its final stage. Over the next 1 to 2 weeks, it consumes the ant's body from the inside. It replaces the soft tissues. It grows, and then it pushes a stalk, a long, thin, fruiting body, directly out of the back of the ant's head, like an antenna growing from a corpse. At the tip of that stalk is a capsule full of new spores. The capsule bursts. Spores rain down onto the forest floor below, onto the other ants walking on their regular foraging trails. And the cycle begins again. This is not a horror story. Or at least, it is not only a horror story. What Cordyceps has built is one of the most elegant and precisely calibrated systems in all of biology. Every step serves a purpose. Every detail has been optimized over tens of millions of years. But the story does not end with ants, because Cordyceps does this to hundreds of species, and each version of the fungus has adapted its strategy to match its specific host. Take the Cordyceps species that targets ghost moths in the Himalayas. This one is called Ophiocordyceps sinensis, and it has been known in traditional Tibetan and Chinese medicine for over 1,000 years. Local people called it Yartsa, gunbu, summergrass, winterworm, because in winter it looks like a caterpillar underground, and in summer a grass-like stalk sprouts from the soil where it died. This species infects moth larvae living underground. The larva is driven upward toward the soil surface, where it dies near the top of the earth. The fungus then sprouts up through the ground, and the stalk emerges above the soil line, releasing spores into mountain meadows where more moth larvae are crawling below. The precision is different from the ant version, but the principle is identical. Move the host to exactly the right place, at exactly the right moment, to maximize the fungus's ability to spread. And then there's the Cordyceps that targets tarantulas in South America. The spider is infected underground in its burrow. The fungus drives it to climb, up out of the burrow, up a plant or tree trunk, where it dies at a height that allows the stalk to release spores over a wide area of forest floor where other tarantulas are walking. Different host, different habitat, different height. Same result. Researchers at the University of Maryland studying the diversity of Cordyceps species have noted that the evolutionary pressure on this fungus has been extraordinary. Each new host species essentially represents a new puzzle, a new body plan, a new nervous system, a new set of muscles. And Cordyceps has evolved a unique chemical toolkit for each one. That is 600 known species. 600 uniques solutions, each one refined across millions of generations. Now here is the question that makes even professional biologists stop and think. How does the fungus know? How does a single-celled organism with no brain and no sensory organs know what height to send the ant to? How does it know that 25 centimeters is correct and 40 centimeters is wrong? How does it know when the ant's body is ready for the stalk to emerge? The answer, researchers believe, lies in chemical signaling. The fungus is constantly sensing its environment through the chemical feedback it receives from the host body, temperature, humidity, light cycles, even the chemical composition of the surrounding air. It is reading the world through chemistry, and it adjusts its behavior accordingly. It is, in a sense, doing what a brain does, just without having one. Biologist Carissa DeBecker at the University of Central Florida has been studying the specific compounds Cordyceps produces inside infected ants. Her team identified several psychoactive and behavior-altering molecules, including compounds that appear to suppress the ant's natural immune response, compounds that interfere with the ant's serotonin signaling, and compounds that appear to induce something resembling a sleepwalking state. The ant is technically awake and moving, but is not processing information the way a healthy ant would. The fungus is not just driving the body, it is also quieting the mind. And this raises a philosophical question that scientists do not fully agree on. Is the ant suffering? Is there something it is like to be an ant with cordyceps inside it? Does the ant experience confusion or fear or the strange sensation of its own limbs moving against its will? We do not know. We genuinely do not know. Insect consciousness is one of the least understood areas in all of neuroscience. What we do know is that the ant's brain remains structurally intact throughout the infection. It is not destroyed. It is overridden. Whether that distinction matters to the ant is a question science cannot yet answer. But here is something the ant's colony can answer. And what they do next is remarkable. Healthy ants can detect infected ants. Not visually. The infected ant looks normal at first, but through chemical signals. Ants communicate almost entirely through pheromones, and an infected ant's pheromone profile changes subtly as the fungus takes hold. Healthy nest mates begin to sense that something is wrong, and they carry the infected ant away from the colony. Sometimes they drag it far from the nest entrance and leave it. Sometimes they physically force it out. The colony is performing its own kind of quarantine, removing the threat before it can spread indoors. This behavior was documented by researchers studying ant colonies in Brazil, who found that cordyceps infection rates inside ant nests were nearly zero, despite very high infection rates in the surrounding forest. The ant's social immune system was keeping the fungus out, but cordyceps had an answer for this too. The fungus appears to slow the rate at which an infected ant's pheromone profile changes, buying itself time before the ant is detected and removed. The longer the ant remains in the colony undetected, the more time the fungus has to grow. And if the ant is removed before the fungus is ready, the fungus simply waits inside the dead ant's body until conditions are right, and then still produces its stalk and spores. It plans for failure. At this point, you might be wondering something. You might be wondering whether any of this could ever happen to a mammal, to something larger, to something like you. The honest answer is that current cordyceps species are not adapted to infect mammals. The human body runs at an internal temperature of around 37 degrees Celsius, and most cordyceps strains cannot survive at that temperature. Our immune systems are also vastly more complex than an insect's. We have multiple overlapping defense systems that would recognize and attack fungal invasion before it could take hold. But fungal diseases in humans are rising, slowly but measurably. Climate change is pushing fungal species into new temperature ranges. New cordyceps-adjacent fungi are being discovered regularly, and evolutionary biologists are careful to note that 48 million years ago, no one would have predicted that a fungus would one day be capable of controlling the behavior of a complex social insect with a nervous system. Evolution does not ask permission. It just experiments. And it has a very long time to run those experiments. This is why cordyceps became the biological inspiration behind the television series The Last of Us, a show that imagined what would happen if a cordyceps-like fungus mutated to infect human hosts. The show's creators consulted with mycologists and evolutionary biologists. The science underlying the fiction is grounded in real mechanisms that real fungi already use. The fungus in the show is fiction. The principles it is based on are not. And this is worth sitting with for a moment, because what cordyceps reveals about the natural world is not just that it is dangerous or strange. It reveals something about the nature of control itself. You assume that your brain is in charge of your body. You assume that the thoughts and intentions you experience are the ones directing your muscles, your movements, your choices. And most of the time, for most people, that assumption is correct. But Cordyceps shows us that the relationship between mind and body is not as locked as it feels. The muscles can be spoken to directly. The behavior can be redirected without the brain's cooperation. The system has vulnerabilities that evolution has already found and exploited in hundreds of species across hundreds of millions of years. Your body is not a fortress. It is an ecosystem. And like all ecosystems, it exists in a constant negotiation with the organisms around it. Some cooperative, some competitive, some with agendas your consciousness will never know about. Researcher David Hughes described Cordyceps as, quote, a masterpiece of natural selection. Not because it is frightening, though it is, but because it demonstrates that intelligence, the ability to sense, respond, adapt, and solve problems, does not require a brain. It does not require consciousness. It does not even require a nervous system. It just requires time and pressure and the relentless, patient logic of survival. The ant climbing the tree right now in the rainforest does not know what it is part of. It does not know it is the final act of a plan that began before humans existed, before mammals dominated the earth, before the rainforest itself was shaped into what it is today. It is just climbing, one step at a time, toward a leaf it will never leave. And somewhere in the air around it, invisible and drifting, are the next generation of spores. Already looking for the next ant, already beginning again.